When I bought my little dream house in this so-called quiet cul-de-sac, I thought I was investing in peace. Privacy. The kind of neighborhood where people waved from their porches, shared sugar, and kids used wires and cans as walkie-talkies, but mostly kept to themselves and enjoyed life without intruding on others. That dream lasted exactly 3 weeks before I met Karen. She was the self-appointed HOA watchdog, nose constantly in everyone's business, clipboard permanently attached to her hand, and a sour expression that looked like it was carved in stone. You couldn't walk your dog without her commenting on the leash length, couldn't mow your lawn without her measuring the blade height. But all of that, as annoying as it was, wasn't what pushed me over the edge. It started with the Tesla. Karen had recently purchased a shiny Model S, probably with her husband's money, though no one had ever actually seen the guy. She flaunted it like it was her firstborn child. Every HOA meeting, which, yes, she forced everyone to attend, she'd casually mention her eco-conscious choices or lecture people on clean energy, all while driving the most expensive car on the block and doing everything she could to make life miserable for the rest of us. Then one morning, I stepped out to water my lawn and noticed something strange. A long, orange extension cord ran from the side of my house, snaking across the lawn and into Karen's driveway, where it was plugged directly into her Tesla. I stared at it for a solid 10 seconds, blinking like maybe I hadn't had enough coffee yet. But nope, there it was, clear as day. She had plugged her car into my outdoor outlet without asking, without warning, without permission. I stormed over to the cord and yanked it out of the socket. And a minute later, Karen burst out of her front door like she'd been waiting behind it with binoculars. "Excuse me," she screeched, jogging across the lawn in flip-flops and a pink robe. "Why did you unplug my car?" I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Because you were stealing my electricity, Karen." She scoffed, placing a hand on her hip like I was the one being unreasonable. "It's just a little juice. You have power to spare, don't you?" "That's not the point," I snapped. "You don't get to plug into my house like it's a public charging station." Karen rolled her eyes and huffed. "Oh, please. It's barely a few dollars. I figured you wouldn't mind. We're neighbors." "We're not friends," I said firmly. "And this is theft. Don't do it again." She marched back to her house in a fit, muttering something about selfish neighbors and people who don't care about the planet. I thought that was the end of it. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd back off after being caught red-handed. But I underestimated her ego. The very next morning, I found the extension cord plugged back in. Again. Same spot, same car, same gall. I didn't unplug it this time. Instead, I walked over with a pair of garden shears and snipped the cord clean in half. By noon, she was at my door, pounding hard enough to shake the windows. I opened it to find her holding the severed cord like it was the body of a beloved pet. "You vandalized my property," she shrieked. "That's a $60 extension cord." "And you stole my power," I shot back. "We're even." Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. "I'm reporting you to the HOA." "Do it," I said, slamming the door in her face. And she did. Within 48 hours, I had a violation notice on my doorstep citing hostile neighbor conduct and property damage. Of course, it came directly from Karen herself. She was on the HOA board, after all. It was clear this was war, and if Karen wanted a war, then I'd give her one she'd never forget. The next few days, I started documenting everything. I installed security cameras pointed at every corner of my yard, particularly the outlet on the side of the house. I bought a new locking outlet cover and installed it with reinforced screws. And just to make a point, I posted a private property, no trespassing sign directly above it. Karen's response? She walked her dog past my house every morning and stared at that outlet like it had personally insulted her. She even started parking her Tesla in a way that the front bumper pointed right at my fence, like it was daring me to say something. That's when the power bills started getting weird. I monitor my energy usage pretty closely, and even with the outlet locked up tight, I noticed my usage spiking in the evenings. At first, I thought maybe it was just the summer heat, or a faulty air conditioner, but then I reviewed the footage. And there she was, Karen, tiptoeing across my side yard at night, screwdriver in hand, bypassing the lock and plugging in her damn car again. I watched her on the footage, all smug and stealthy, thinking she was some kind of criminal mastermind. It was almost funny if it hadn't been so infuriating. She had removed the screws from the outlet cover while I was at work, then carefully replaced them each time to make it look untouched. She thought she was clever. She thought I wouldn't notice. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just angry. I was plotting. That's when the idea came to me. A friend of mine from college works in electrical engineering. I sent him the footage and explained the situation. "She's stealing your power?" he said. "That's illegal as hell." "I know," I told him, "and I want to scare the crap out of her. Nothing dangerous, just something memorable." He chuckled on the other end. "You ever heard of a shock circuit?" I leaned in closer to the phone, heart racing slightly. "What's a shock circuit?" My friend Jason chuckled. "It's a simple deterrent. Legal, too, if you install it with proper warning signage. Basically, when someone tampers with your outlet, it delivers a mild but startling electric jolt. Not enough to injure, but definitely enough to scare the hell out of them. Think of it like a high-voltage do not touch sign." I grinned. "That sounds perfect. Can you help me set it up?" "Absolutely," he replied. "Just don't go full Frankenstein on her. Keep it humane. You want to teach her a lesson, not land in court." That weekend, Jason came by with a duffel bag full of parts and a gleam in his eye. "You know," he said, pulling out wires and a surge protector, "it's kind of poetic. She's been stealing energy, and now she's gonna get it." We wired the outlet with a safety-triggered shock loop. It wouldn't activate under regular use, only when someone tampered with the panel or tried to bypass the new lock, just like Karen had been doing. We also mounted a camera directly above it, plus a motion-activated floodlight for dramatic flare. To seal the deal, I posted a laminated warning label beside the outlet that read, "Private power supply. Tampering will result in shock." Jason admired the setup once we were done. "She'll never know what hit her." I laughed. Or, more importantly, why it hit her. The next 2 nights passed without incident. Karen must have noticed the new lock and warning because she didn't make a move, but I knew her. She was a creature of impulse, of arrogance, and she couldn't stand being told no. Sure enough, on the 3rd night, I got the motion alert on my phone at 1:17 a.m. I opened the app, rubbing my eyes, and there she was, Karen, in a black hoodie, creeping across my yard like a bargain bin cat burglar. She crouched beside the outlet and pulled out a screwdriver. "Unbelievable," I muttered to myself, watching her go to work. She unscrewed the panel, just like before, slid her cord into the outlet, and that's when it happened. The moment her fingers touched the plug, there was a pop, a flash of blue light, and a yelp so loud it echoed through the camera mic. Karen shot back like she'd touched a live wire, because, well, she had. She fell backward into my hydrangeas, flailed for a second, then scrambled up and bolted for her house, her shoes flying off mid-sprint. I watched in stunned silence for a moment, then burst out laughing. "Jason," I whispered. Calling him, "It worked." She got zapped and ran like the devil himself was chasing her. "You got it on camera?" he asked. "Oh yeah," I said, already saving the footage. "Crystal clear." By morning, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Mark, my next-door neighbor, showed up at my porch grinning like a kid at Christmas. "Did you hear what happened to Karen last night?" I sipped my coffee and feigned innocence. "No? What?" "She says someone rigged your outlet to electrocute her." I shrugged. "Well, I did put up a warning sign." He laughed. "You are my hero." That evening, I got a knock at the door. This time, it wasn't Karen. It was a police officer. Officer Delaney, a young guy with a calm voice and a very tired look in his eyes. "Mr. Harlow," he said, "we received a complaint that you assaulted your neighbor with an electric trap." "Assaulted?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my clearly marked private outlet that someone trespassed to tamper with?" He sighed, flipping through his notepad. I figured there was more to it. Karen's story was dramatic. I invited him inside, showed him the footage, the warning signs, and the tamper-proof legal disclaimer I had printed and laminated right next to the outlet. His expression shifted from concerned to amused. She really walked right up and ignored the sign? Didn't even flinch, I said. Went full mission. Impossible until the outlet bit back. He nodded, closing his notebook. I don't see anything criminal here. You've got your documentation, signage, and video evidence. As far as I'm concerned, she tampered with private property and got exactly what was coming to her. Appreciate you being reasonable, I said. As he left, he turned back and added, For the record, that's one of the funniest things I've heard all year. Karen didn't show her face for 2 days after that. When she finally did reappear, she wore a wrist brace and sunglasses and walked like someone who had just discovered static electricity for the first time. She didn't say a word to me, but her glare could have melted steel. And still, she didn't learn. Later that week, I found a new complaint in my mailbox. This one accused me of creating a hazardous condition on my property. It came with a $250 fine from the HOA, signed, of course, by Karen herself. That was the last straw. I took the footage of her trespassing, the shock, the police report clearing me, and Karen's bogus complaint, and sent the entire file to the rest of the HOA board members. Within 2 days, I got a phone call from Mr. Langston, the HOA's vice president. Mr. Harlow, he said, we've received your complaint about Ms. Karen Wilcox. After reviewing your evidence, we're deeply concerned. I'd hope so, I replied. She's abusing her power to punish people for her own mistakes. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, the board is convening for an emergency session to review her conduct. Would you be willing to attend? Oh, I said, smiling. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The emergency HOA board meeting was held on a Sunday evening, inside the small but overly formal Oak Ridge Estates clubhouse. I arrived 10 minutes early with a thick folder under my arm and a quiet, calculated calm in my chest. Most of the board members were already seated at the long rectangular table, whispering amongst themselves. Karen, however, was pacing in the corner like a caged animal, clutching a notepad and casting death stares at anyone who made eye contact. She looked even more irritated than usual, her hair frazzled and her wrist brace hanging awkwardly. I took a seat directly across from her and set my folder down with a polite but unmistakably smug smile. Her jaw clenched the moment our eyes met. "Let's come to order," said Mr. Langston, tapping his gavel once. "The purpose of tonight's meeting is to review recent complaints and conduct allegations involving board member Karen Wilcox. We've received documentation from Mr. Harlow concerning a series of events that may constitute abuse of power and potential HOA code violations." Karen immediately sprang up, slapping her notepad on the table. "This is a witch hunt," she barked. "He's making me out to be some kind of criminal because I cited him for an actual hazard. He wired an electrical trap to his outdoor outlet." I raised an eyebrow and waited for Langston to nod toward me. "If I may," I said calmly, opening my folder. "I'd like to present the timeline of events, along with visual proof, police statements, and a formal rebuttal to the fine Ms. Wilcox issued me." I handed out printed packets to each board member. As you'll see, my outlet was marked private, locked, and posted with a clear warning sign. I also have footage of Ms. Wilcox trespassing onto my property at night, tampering with the panel, and illegally using my electricity to charge her Tesla. The shock circuit only activated after she attempted to bypass the lock, which was designed to prevent further theft. Langston skimmed the documents while another board member, Mrs. Duvall, muttered, "This can't be real." Karen huffed loudly, arms crossed. "He's lying. That footage could have been faked. Deepfakes exist, you know." Mr. Langston looked over his glasses and deadpanned. "Karen, this footage shows your license plate, your face, your car, and your slippers. You can't seriously suggest he deepfaked your sandals." Laughter rippled quietly across the table. Karen flushed scarlet. I continued. "She filed a false complaint with the HOA the following day, claiming I created a hazardous environment, despite the incident being the result of her own unlawful behavior. She then attempted to fine me $250 through the HOA for an event that occurred because she was stealing power and ignored clearly posted warnings. I also have a signed police statement clearing me of any wrongdoing and confirming the legality of the protective system. Langston tapped the folder. We've read the report. You were within your rights. Karen exploded. You're seriously going to side with him? He electrocuted me. Langston remained calm. No, you electrocuted yourself. You trespassed onto his property and tampered with a locked outlet you had no permission to use. Mr. Harlow had the foresight to post proper warnings and install the deterrent legally. If anything, your actions have exposed the HOA to liability. At that, Karen fell silent for a moment, blinking rapidly like she hadn't expected to lose control of the room so fast. Then she pivoted, tone sharpening. This is clearly personal. He's trying to make me look bad because I fined him before for other violations. I've never had a violation, I said coolly. Not one, until you tried to invent one after getting caught. I've never missed an HOA fee, never left my bins out, and my lawn has passed every inspection. This is about you abusing your authority to retaliate. Mrs. Duval frowned. Karen, did you even notify the board about the fine you issued? Karen looked away. It was within my rights as a board member. Langston cut in. That's not the question. Did you notify us? No, she muttered. There was a long silence before Mr. Langston finally sighed. Then that's a violation of our bylaws. Unilateral disciplinary actions without board approval are grounds for review. Karen's voice rose an octave. So what? You're kicking me off the board because I tried to enforce rules? No, Langston replied evenly. We're reviewing your behavior because you trespassed, stole electricity, filed a false report, and retaliated against a homeowner with a bogus fine. You've opened us up to liability and acted outside the scope of your authority. Another board member, Mr. Patel, who rarely spoke, finally chimed in. This isn't the first time you've done something like this either, Karen. You fined the Watsons for planting roses outside the garden limits. You had Mrs. Lynn's decorative lights removed without a vote. You've harassed at least 3 families over mailbox colors. That's called maintaining standards, she shouted. That's called acting like a dictator, I replied. At this point, Langston placed his hands together. We're taking a vote. Motion to remove Karen Wilcox from the board effective immediately due to abuse of power and violation of bylaws. All in favor? One by one, hands went up. Langston, Duval, Patel, Ramirez. Even shy little Genevieve from Unit 6 raised hers without hesitation. Karen's mouth fell open. This isn't over, she spat. Langston set down his gavel. Actually, it is. Karen stormed out of the meeting, muttering under her breath, slamming the door so hard that a nearby plaque rattled on the wall. The room sat in stunned silence for a few seconds. Then Mr. Patel chuckled. Think she'll try to sue? She can try, I said. I'll countersue her into next week. Langston smiled. Mr. Harlow, thank you for presenting this so clearly. We'll issue a formal letter tomorrow. As for the fine she placed on you, it's revoked and will be stricken from the record. With Karen officially removed, the entire atmosphere in the neighborhood began to shift. It was subtle at first. People walking their dogs with more confidence, yard decorations returning, kids playing on the sidewalks again. You don't realize how tightly a community holds its breath until the one suffocating it is gone. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to started waving. A few even thanked me directly for standing up to her. Mark knocked on my door 2 days later holding a 6-pack. To the electric hero of Oak Ridge, he said, raising a can. I never thought I'd see the day. The queen is dethroned. I cracked open a beer and smiled. She thought she could run the whole block like her personal fiefdom. Mark laughed. She got charged in more ways than one. With Karen officially booted off the HOA board, I expected her to lick her wounds quietly and maybe vanish into the background. But no, this was Karen we were talking about. If petty revenge were a sport, she'd be an Olympic champion. Just 2 days after the board vote, I found a crumpled flyer stuffed into my mailbox. It was an anonymous neighborhood bulletin accusing me of endangering the community by installing booby traps on my property. According to the letter, I had created a violent and unsafe precedent that put children and the elderly at risk. The best part? It was printed in Comic Sans. That's how I knew Karen had snapped. I didn't even get mad. I just rolled my eyes and tossed the paper into the recycling bin. Still, I wasn't about to let her keep spreading lies. That evening, I walked the neighborhood, chatting with the same people who had once avoided eye contact when Karen ruled the block like a cranky HOA overlord. Turns out, most of them had gotten the same flyer, and most of them laughed about it. "Booby traps?" my neighbor Clara said, sipping lemonade on her porch. "Next, she'll say you built a medieval moat around your garage." I grinned and replied, "If I did, I'd make sure it had sharks with frickin' laser beams." Even though she wasn't on the HOA anymore, Karen still tried to stir the pot. I caught her driving slowly past my house at least once a day, pretending to check on her old friends, though she barely rolled her window down. Once, she even parked at the corner and watched me trim my hedges for a solid 20 minutes like some bitter gargoyle. That was when I realized she couldn't stand it, not just losing her authority, but losing her ability to control me. So I did the one thing guaranteed to make her implode. I hosted a neighborhood barbecue. I sent out the invitations a week in advance. No HOA permits, no forms. Just a simple flyer delivered to each doorstep with a handwritten note at the bottom. Now that the weather, and the neighborhood, is warming up, I figured we could all use a little celebration. Hot dogs, cold drinks, and no Karen. The RSVP list filled up in less than a day. On the afternoon of the barbecue, I set up tables, string lights, coolers packed with drinks, and a Bluetooth speaker playing classic rock. People brought chips, pies, and potato salad like we were suddenly in a normal Rockwell painting. Mark showed up early and helped me haul the grill into the front yard. "Think she'll try to crash it?" he asked, setting a bowl of guac down on the folding table. "I'd be disappointed if she didn't," I said. And I wasn't wrong. Karen arrived about an hour in, wearing an oversized sun hat and sunglasses like she was trying to blend in despite being the most conspicuous person alive. She hovered at the edge of the yard, pretending to admire the landscaping while scowling at the smell of smoked bratwurst and grilled corn. A few guests glanced over, muttering awkwardly. I stepped away from the grill, walked up to the edge of my lawn, and gave her a smile that was anything but friendly. "Karen," I said, tilting my head, "I don't believe you were invited." Her nose twitched. "It's a public sidewalk," she sniffed. "I'm allowed to be here." "Absolutely," I said, "just like I'm allowed to blast country music all night and install another shock circuit if you so much as step onto my driveway." Her lips curled. "You're going to regret all of this," she muttered. I leaned in slightly. "I think you're the one who regrets it, Karen. Because this is what a real community looks like, and you're not part of it anymore." She huffed, turned on her heel, and stormed off, her sandals smacking against the concrete like angry claps. A few people clapped. I didn't tell them to stop. The barbecue went down as one of the best nights our neighborhood had seen in years. People swapped stories, played lawn games, and, for the first time in a long while, nobody was worried about lawn violations or whether their patio furniture matched the HOA's aesthetic standards. And when the sun dipped below the rooftops and the string lights flickered on, someone handed me a paper plate with "Neighborhood Hero" scrawled in barbecue sauce. I didn't ask who did it. I just smiled and raised it like a trophy. But of course, Karen wasn't done. The next morning, I woke up to find my trash cans knocked over with banana peels and paper towels scattered across the driveway. It was petty, it was juvenile, and it reeked of Karen. I didn't have proof, but I had a hunch. So I checked my security footage. Sure enough, at 3:17 a.m., Karen's car crept up the street, and a hooded figure exited the passenger side and shoved over both bins before running off like a raccoon who realized it had just committed a felony. I clipped the footage and emailed it to the new HOA board. Then, just for fun, I posted a still frame to our community Facebook group with the caption, "Beware of wild animals. They tend to knock over trash when they're angry and recently unemployed. The likes started rolling in. Later that week, Mr. Langston gave me a call. "We reviewed your footage," he said, suppressing a chuckle, "and we're officially issuing a trespass warning against Karen. If she sets foot on your property again, it's a legal matter." "Thanks," I said. "And don't worry, I've got more security than Fort Knox now." Langston paused, then said, "By the way, we've been discussing a possible amendment to our bylaws. Something about formal consequences for board members who weaponize their authority. Would you be willing to help draft it?" I smiled so wide it hurt. "Langston, I'd be honored." As I hung up the phone, I looked out the window at my outlet, the same one that started it all, still locked, still marked, still mine. Karen had tried to use it to power her car and her ego, and now she couldn't even stand on my lawn without breaking the law. This wasn't just about electricity anymore, it was about power, and hers was officially cut off. The following weeks were oddly peaceful. For the first time since I'd moved into this HOA-ruled neighborhood, I could work in my garage without worrying about unsolicited compliance checks or lawn nitpicking. Karen had vanished from public life, no surprise there. Ever since the security footage spread like wildfire through the neighborhood Facebook group, she'd become the butt of every joke and the cautionary tale on every porch. It was like she'd crawled into a hole and pulled the HOA charter in after her. Still, I knew Karen. She wasn't the type to give up, not when her pride was bruised, not when her sense of superiority was stripped away, and sure enough, she found a way to strike back, just not in the way I expected. One morning, I walked out to find a bright orange sticker slapped onto the side of my mailbox. "Warning: non-compliant electrical modifications under review." My eyebrows nearly flew off my face. I peeled it off, marched back inside, and called Langston from the HOA board. "Is this a joke?" I asked, snapping a picture and texting it to him. He called back a minute later. "We didn't authorize that," he said. "In fact, we're in the middle of revising those exact bylaws. This smells like Karen." "I thought she was banned from board duties," I said, fuming. "She is," Langston replied. "But if she's filing fake complaints under someone else's name, that's a whole new level of violation." I thanked him and hung up, then did what any responsible adult would do. I walked straight to Karen's house and knocked on the door. She didn't answer at first. I waited. Then, just as I turned to leave, the door creaked open a few inches. Karen's face peeked out like a nosy raccoon in the middle of a daylight raid. "What do you want?" she asked, voice sharp. "An explanation," I said, holding up the sticker. "You're done pretending to be the HOA police, Karen. Time to let it go." "I didn't put that there," she lied, eyes darting like a toddler who just got caught drawing on the walls. "Maybe someone else in the neighborhood is finally waking up to your dangerous antics." "You mean someone else with access to HOA issue warning stickers?" I raised a brow. "Because unless you've got a fan club, this reeks of you." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're harassing me," she snapped. "I'm warning you," I said, voice calm but steady. "Next time I find something on my property with your fingerprints, it's going straight to the sheriff's office." I didn't wait for a response. I just walked away, leaving her standing in her doorway with her mouth open like she had more to say but couldn't find the words. I had more important things to do than argue with a woman who thought trespassing and fraud were acceptable forms of neighborhood management. But, as always, Karen wasn't done. 2 days later, my power flickered. It was a tiny surge, barely enough to reset the microwave clock, but it got my attention. Then it happened again the next night. That's when I started digging. I checked the power junction next to my garage. The cover was loose, and taped underneath was a tiny device I didn't recognize. A current diverter. My blood went cold. Karen hadn't just been stealing my power. She had come back to tamper with it again. I pulled the device off and called the utility company. The technician who came out confirmed my suspicion. "This is designed to redirect current," he said, turning the device in his gloved hands. "Whoever installed this was trying to siphon your electricity without tripping the breaker. Highly illegal." I didn't even have to say her name. The technician shook his head and added, "We'll file a report with the city. You should report it to the police, too." That night, I filed another report. Trespassing, tampering with electrical infrastructure, theft. It was starting to look less like a neighborhood squabble and more like a case for Judge Judy, or maybe a federal court. 2 days later, I got a knock on the door. This time, it wasn't Karen. It was a deputy. "Mr. Carter?" he asked. "We've received your reports. Mind if I come in?" I let him inside, showed him the device, the camera footage from the outlet tampering incident, and the HOA sticker Karen had slapped on my mailbox. He took it all down with the patient calm of someone who'd seen plenty of neighborhood feuds turn into courtroom brawls. After taking his notes, he said, "Here's what we're going to do. We'll open an investigation into power theft and property tampering. If we can link the device directly to your neighbor, we'll press charges, but we're going to need your cooperation." "You have it," I said without hesitation. "Whatever you need." He nodded. "We'll also put in a request for a search warrant. If she's hoarding HOA materials or tools for this kind of tampering, it'll show up." The moment the deputy walked out the door, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and weariness. Karen was spiraling. She wasn't just petty anymore. She was desperate. And desperate people made dumb mistakes, which, in this case, worked out perfectly for me. Later that week, I saw the patrol car pull up outside Karen's house. I didn't even pretend not to watch. A second cruiser arrived 10 minutes later, and 2 officers walked up to her door. They knocked, waited, then entered, calmly but firmly. From my porch, I saw Karen flailing her arms like an inflatable tube man at a car dealership. I couldn't hear what she was yelling, but I didn't need to. I knew the script. Denial, deflection, probably a tearful speech about being persecuted for caring about the community. It didn't work. The officers escorted her out, not in handcuffs, but clearly not as a free woman. A small crowd had gathered by then, neighbors peeking out from behind blinds or standing silently on their lawns. Mark walked up beside me and whistled low. "She's finally getting booked, huh?" he asked. "Not arrested yet," I said, "but they're investigating her for felony tampering and theft. It's only a matter of time." Mark shook his head. "Man, all over a power outlet. What a legacy." I watched as Karen was helped into the back of the cruiser and driven off. Her house, once the fortress of her fake authority, now looked small and sad, like her influence had drained out of it, leaving behind nothing but shutters and silence. For the first time in months, I exhaled and felt peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't flicker like a sabotaged electrical line. The kind that only comes when you finally outsmarted the person who thought they could control you, and lost. Karen's arrest didn't come immediately, but the investigation made it clear that her days of sneaky power grabs were over. The officers left her house with several confiscated items, including a binder full of HOA documents, a label printer with sheets of warning stickers, and a toolkit that looked suspiciously like it was designed for tampering with residential power systems. The neighborhood buzzed with the news. People who once feared Karen were now emboldened, sharing their own stories of her overreach. One neighbor, a sweet old woman named June, told me Karen had once fined her for having too many wind chimes on her porch. "3's the limit," Karen had apparently said. "Any more, and you're disrupting the neighborhood's audio harmony." Audio harmony. That was real. I had to chuckle. "She actually said that?" I asked June. "Oh, yes," June said with a snort. "Then I caught her stealing basil from my garden the next week, told her off and got slapped with a noise violation for raising my voice." Now, though, Karen had no power. Not on the HOA board, not in the neighborhood, and, based on what the officers found, not even in her own house, because it turned out she'd rerouted so many cords and power lines to her Tesla charger that her main panel had shorted, causing a minor electrical fire in her garage a few days before the search. It didn't spread far, but the scorch marks left on the siding told a story. Even electricity had turned against her. A week later, I was asked to speak at a special HOA assembly. With Karen suspended pending criminal charges, The board wanted to formally revise several rules and address abuses of power in recent years. I knew what that meant: damage control. I didn't want to be the center of attention, but after what I'd been through, I had a few things to say. When I stepped up to the podium in the clubhouse, the room fell quiet. People leaned in. Some smiled encouragingly. Others looked sheepish, as if remembering a time they'd sided with Karen. I cleared my throat. "Look," I began. "We all know why we're here. This neighborhood was supposed to be about community, but somewhere along the line the rules became weapons, and people like Karen started swinging them around like they were judge, jury, and executioner." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw some heads nodding, so I kept going. I'm not saying HOAs are inherently bad, but when one person, someone who doesn't even understand what they're enforcing, starts bending rules for their own benefit, that's when the whole thing falls apart. I didn't just have my outlet stolen, I had my peace stolen, and so did a lot of you. There was a pause, then applause. I wasn't expecting it, but it filled the room. Mark, standing near the back with a coffee in hand, gave me a thumbs up. After the meeting, Lancaster, the new interim president, pulled me aside. "We're thinking of adding a new committee," he said. "One focused on tech oversight and home system integrity, basically to make sure no one pulls a Karen again. You interested?" I smiled. "As long as I don't have to print warning stickers, I'm in." The next few months were transformative. Karen's court date approached, and the evidence stacked against her left little room for argument. She was charged with felony theft, tampering with a utility system, false reporting, and multiple counts of impersonating an HOA officer. The prosecutor offered a plea deal, but Karen, in classic fashion, refused it. She insisted on a trial, said she was being persecuted by a mob of amateurs. That quote made the front page of the local paper. The trial was short. My security footage alone, her in my yard messing with my outlet, was enough to sway the jury. Add in the tampering device, the stickers, the testimony from the electrical technician, and even her old texts bragging about keeping the rabble in line. And the verdict wasn't a surprise. Guilty. She was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest, 200 hours of community service, and a hefty fine to cover the power theft and damages. But the real sentence: public humiliation. Her reputation was done. No more HOA boards, no more Tesla. She had to sell it to pay legal fees. I saw her one last time after the verdict. She was standing at the edge of her property, staring at a "for sale" sign that had been planted in her front yard. A moving truck was already parked in her driveway. She didn't say anything when I walked by, just looked at me, bitter and empty. "Need a charge?" I asked, pausing. Her nostrils flared. She looked like she might scream. Instead, she turned around and went inside. That was the end of Karen. The neighborhood didn't just survive her, it got better. Without her constant meddling, people started actually enjoying where they lived. Yard sales became common. Neighbors helped each other with projects. I expanded my garage into a little workshop and gave free advice to anyone curious about home automation or solar installations. It felt normal, which was all I'd ever wanted. As for me, I installed a new outlet, this time with an encrypted smart lock and real-time alerts. Not because I expected another Karen, but because it felt good to reclaim control. One afternoon, Mark and I were sitting on the porch, sipping iced tea and watching a group of kids ride scooters down the sidewalk. "You know," he said, "it's kind of poetic." "What is?" I asked. "That she thought she was untouchable. That she thought her power came from some title on a piece of paper. But the second the neighborhood stood up, she folded." I raised my glass. "To solar justice." He clinked his against mine. "And to never plugging in without asking first." We laughed. And just like that, peace returned. No more fake warnings, no more stolen current, no more HOA dictatorship. Just neighbors, electricity, and a community finally left to live in harmony.